Are we in for a doozy in 2023?
We got some doozies in front of us and some doozies behind us. But we do have a very specific flavor to the year ahead because it's dominated by what's called ingresses, meaning planets changing signs. And with Pluto being one of them, we are in for shifts and changes in the world that we will all have to grapple with on a more collective level. I'm going to describe some things about 2023 that might make some of your listeners a little nervous, but there's a lot going on in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years on the planet.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've been wondering what in the world is coming for the new year, and if we'll be all right, then do we have the 2023 prediction show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Michael Lennox, my all-time favorite astrologer and creator of the Daily Astro Alert, about all things in the new year and what they mean for you. And I'll be doing it quietly since the baby is sleeping. So welcome back to the show, Michael. Are you ready to shine?
I am. I don't know if I can be quiet for the baby.
I do not want you being quiet. That is not why I brought you on board,
my
Michael.
Nature.
So I can't believe I'm going to put it this way, but I think this would be your language. Before we dive right into things, are we in for a doozy in 2023?
You know, I think we are, not compared to, say, like the doozy of 2020 or the doozy of what I think might be coming in, like, say, 25 and 26. So we got some doozies in front of us and some doozies behind us. But we do have a very specific flavor to the year ahead because it's dominated by what's called ingresses, meaning planets changing signs. And when outer planets and social planets, so outer planets like Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, or the social planets like Saturn and Jupiter, when they change signs, the world has big expressions. Big things change on the planet. And with Pluto being one of them, we are in for a doozy of shifts and changes in the world that we will all have to grapple with on a more collective level. That's the sensation of 23 is driven by this sign change things. And part of our conversation today is I'll talk about some things in the past that will remind people of what it's like when a planet like Pluto changes signs, because we've all lived through that. So I think that the world is going to reflect a lot of changes. There's more doozy stuff to come. And outside of that, I'm reserving my sense of what's going to happen because, kids, I'm just another bozo on the bus.
Well, as we like to say, we're all in this fishbowl. It's pretty hard to get out of it now, isn't it?
That's right.
With that said, we were talking last year, and you were saying that 2022 would be the reprieve, the gentler moment. I'm not so sure that was, Michael.
No, I have a way of backtracking and sort of making sense of something that I could not have known without going through it. And I learned something. That's one of the beautiful things about astrology is it's a never-ending opportunity to learn more. So let me see if I can give a kind of explanation about, say, the distinction between 2020, 2021, and why I said 2022 would be a certain way and found that it was maybe not quite so gentle.
Yes.
So there's a thing called transits. That's what I'm an expert in as an astrologer. And transits are the movement of planets, the angles that they make, and how we receive the energy of the waves that are generated when planets make connections that are geometrical out there. Those are called transits. So in 2020 and in 2021, it was all about big transits, major transits. In 2020, it was Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter in conjunction, planets at the same place. That's a transit.
Yeah.
In 2020, so that was change, transformation. And if you remember in 2019, we were like, everything's going to change. And you said, how do you mean? I'm like we've never seen before, right? Then 2021 was
Michael.
right? 2021 was similar in that the year was marked by the big kahuna of 2021 was Saturn and Uranus in a square, the teacher and the awakener in a 90-degree angle. So that's another transit. Transits like that, big ones between social and outer planets, set up global experiences that we respond to. So 2020 and 2021 was very much about that, as you well know from just remembering the last couple of years. So when I was getting ready to talk about 2022, and I said this to you, Michael, last year, I said, I'm not quite sure what to make of a year absent of major planetary transits. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what I said about it back then, but what I recognized was without there being humongous collective energies and world events driving the astrology ships, we were all experiencing personal level of change and transformation that I think was deeper than any year that I can remember. Well, hardly I was in my second Saturn return. That's part of it.
So to pause you for a brief second, it's interesting because one of the things that you just said, and I hadn't thought of this before, is it can be planetarily that things are, in theory, because they're always based on what's going on around us, in theory, it could be gentler. However, a lot was already set in motion.
Yes, that's another thing that people have to remember. And here's the language I use for that when I'm doing my daily Astro Alert writing that you're always talking about, is I will refer to something as in a vacuum or connected to your narrative. So that's what I mean by that. I will describe an energy of a transit and I will say, in a vacuum, this would be awesome. But it's not in a vacuum. It has to fit within what else is going on. And your narrative piece is like, I might write something about a new moon or a full moon and say, wow, beautiful heart opening.
Yeah.
But if your narrative is that you're in something that's painful and grieving, your narrative is going to take this heartfelt transit and experience more depth of grief, pain, and healing. So those are things that people have to remember, that astrology doesn't discount the flow. And you put that very articulately.
So when I look at cycling, for instance, or what is it? Objects in motion, physics. Objects in motions tend to stay in motion. It's all of those other things that we get to look at. We're not living in a vacuum. There is other resistance at play.
Yes. And so in 2021, the big transit was Saturn and Uranus in a square. Saturn teaches, Uranus awakens. They wanted to do that, but through conflict, 90-degree angles. And just for the people who are like newish to astrology, what that even means is if Saturn and Uranus are in a square, that means that if I'm sitting here on Earth and I look up at Saturn, Uranus is going to be 90 degrees away from our perspective. So that was the dominant energy in 2021. And the whole planet was experiencing this kind of waking up through lessons and conflict and obstacles. When we got into this year, 2022, that square started to dissipate so that those energies were not exact anymore. This is speaking to your thing of it was already in motion. So the kahuna of change and lessons and breakdowns of 2021 had us in this momentum of conflict, teaching, and awakening us. And then because in 2022, there weren't any of those big waves to distract us from our internal shifting and jockeying on a personal level, we all had to learn and wake up through conflict. Because as planets moved during this year, they were triggering that square by touching Saturn and touching Uranus. And so we all experienced that again at a personal level rather than a shared collective level as we did last year.
So going to 2023.
Yes.
A question from Jessica. How can people prepare, or is it too late?
Listen, it is never too late because every preparation is something that is to play out in the moment. And each day we are in a position to prepare to receive the energies of any given moment. I'm going to describe some things about 2023 that might make some of your listeners a little nervous, but there's a lot going on in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years on the planet. And Pluto changing signs this coming year is probably the biggest energy that we're going to be dealing with. So Pluto is the planet that governs deep change and transformation. And so as Pluto goes, things are dying and being reborn. That's how powerful his movement and cycles play out for us. And so when Pluto changes signs, and this is something that often takes like 2 years to play out because of the slow movement and retrograde motion, things on the planet change powerfully, deeply, and really transformationally. So if I carry us all back to 2006, Pluto was in Sagittarius, finishing up his movement through that sign. And we astrologers were all like, okay, Capricorn rules structures. It's Saturn's sign. Structures, social structures like governments, banking, housing markets. You get the picture, right? And then Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2007, backtracked out, moved back in, did this a couple of times between 7 and 8. And in moving into Capricorn, structures began to topple. And astrologers were like, this is Pluto moving into Capricorn. The banking, too big to fail. That's Pluto moving in. The housing bubble blowing up. That's Pluto moving into Capricorn. So here's what's important about this to get. It's the structures that toppled because Capricorn rules structure. Pluto is moving into Aquarius this March. He will move in, come back, move back in, and over the next 2 years, he will zip across the end of Capricorn and into Aquarius. In terms of the difficulties that might bring, we live in a world that is built on digital technology. Aquarius invented that. Aquarius is the innovative, far-reaching, out-of-the-box kind of consciousness that's of the higher octave of mind that is the sign that rules things like computers and the internet and social media, and connecting in community through social media is a pure Age of Aquarius idea. It's where we're most vulnerable in terms of a stable planet that's in polarized enmity because we rely so heavily on our interconnectivity through the internet that I think that things like the internet, Bitcoin, technology are going to be the source of both great uplift and expansion over the next 2 decades, but also the destructive potential of Pluto moving into that sign puts our vulnerabilities into place that connect to what can happen when the ways in which technology supports life is potentially deeply interruptible because the planet of death and rebirth has moved into the territory that governs those things.
Age of Aquarius. This is more of a big, several thousand year kind of thing. But we think of the Age of Aquarius as more of an age of peace, of more of an age of coming together.
Oh, honey.
Oh, boy. Go for it, Michael.
I would say that is the promise. That is the promise of the Age of Aquarius. Aquarius invented the idea that a diverse community can harmonize, lift itself up, and create a consciousness in which everyone is cared for, because that's what Aquarius represents. But sweetheart, we're in the first couple of decades of a 2,000-year age, and we're coming out of a 2,000-year age that was marked by unconsciousness. Pisces is the age we're coming out of. Pisces doesn't even know that there's a world up there. It's just the floating in the sea of the collective. And it's in that age that certain ideas about God and connection through the divine were able to be so deeply unconscious, deeply ignorant of the actual humanity that communities are to serve. And the idea is that we can come out of that unconsciousness and build something that works for the entire community. What I like to say is we got 2,000 years to get this right. But understand what we're seeing in the world, if you turn on the news, is the old world grasping up. It's an extinction grab. Mm-hmm. The patriarchy and the old world order is dying, and so it is grasping first. And this is what we are living through. And I'm not sure that I will see in my lifetime the beginnings of the possibility of the age of Aquarius turning into peace for all. But we're certainly living through a moment where we're seeing the absolute destruction that has to take place in order for that peace to rise up. So Pluto moving into Aquarius in some ways is kind of like the gunshot that says, okay, we've arrived. We've arrived at the moment where in earnest for the next 2 decades, 2 things are going to happen. Technology is going to raise up and be crazy expansive. But the dangers of the destructiveness of Pluto in that archetype are going to put us in a place of fighting the fight to break through the old, to rise up to this new peace for humanity possibility. We're not living in that era. We're living in the change, the gear shift, where things have to be dismantled. And I think when Pluto moved into Capricorn, we started to dismantle the structures. And then when Pluto moving to Aquarius, amplifies that dismantling into a higher community level, and peace for humanity comes out of what tumult is happening now. And your followers, my followers, we're in the band of folks who believe we are here to help.
Thank you. Before we dive into some more ingresses, and we're going to talk about Saturn into Pisces, speaking of Pisces, in just a moment.
Yes.
I went through, Red Cross, Coast lifeguard training years ago, among other things, and EMT training, all that good stuff. And you had to be careful with the drowning victim because the drowning victim is going to bring you down.
That's right.
What you're describing as the old guard is the drowning victim.
Yeah.
How do we, as your audience, my audience, we're empaths, we're more awake, we're more sensitive as well. How do we help to shift our world or humanity, because we all want to help, without getting pulled down by the drowning victim?
God, that's such a great question. So here's what comes. I see 2 things that emerge for me out of this question. And I'll go first to the one that I relate to. Yeah. Because I don't know how to change things outside in the world. I feel disempowered to do so. Partly because I just don't identify with the idea of being an activist. Right. Which has some personal things for me because my mother was a little crazy in that area and I kind of shrunk back from that, but it's also not in my nature.
How about instead of an activist, how about an introvist?
Well, I guess that is what I am. And I'm putting the activist thing over here as the second part of my answer. So the introvist, whatever that is what I know how to do. And what I know how to help other people do is to respect the fact that this world that we live in is 100% an energetic projection of the collective consciousness. It's not even real. What we see is a reflection of all of the people on the planet's holding of an idea of what the world is. And since the world is polarized, enraged, ready to kill each other in the name of I'm right, you're wrong, that has to live in each of us, or it could not be the world we live in. Now, some of us are doing this deftly and some of us are stuck in it, but my job for myself was to go inside, heal the warring, polarization inside of me so that I can teach others to do the same, believing that when more people on the planet are vibing in that direction, the outer reflection will be able to change because what is out there is a reflection of what's in here. I know how to do this. I do it with joy and glee and love because it's the best work there is for someone like me. And I would say half of the answer for people is just work on yourself. Fix the war inside of you and know that you're helping. Even if you turn on the news and feel disempowered, turn off the news, look in the mirror and say, hey, am I at war with myself? And if I am, can I heal it? The other thing is that I said people have to get activated. It's not me. I'm not an activist, but people need to stand up more and in harmony with others. One thing that I've been saying for years is I believe that Pluto in Capricorn has created peace movements. And I always did to emphasize the many different movements. But I always talked about it as separate movements. And I hope that the 20 years or so of Pluto in Aquarius will start to gather separate consciousnesses into alignment with each other so that the different peace movements are starting to work together to foster change, because that's an Aquarian notion.
And my language is always going to be, and can we go from fight to my love is your love? Let's go to Saturn into Pisces.
So Saturn into Pisces, first of all.
And when is that?
That happens in March. In early March, the planet Saturn, which has been in Capricorn, his own ruling sign for the last 2.5 years, this is a kind of external, internal shift, right? Capricorn is very much an external world sign. So the planet of reckoning, task mastering, teaching, being in a sign that represents the social structures out in the world, it is safe to say that the last 2+ years and the next handful of months of Saturn, I'm sorry, I keep saying Saturn in Capricorn, which is wrong. Saturn in Aquarius is very much about the outside world and what's challenging about that, right? So when Saturn moves into Pisces, the sign that invented the unconscious, we're back into a notion of lessons that come from not seeing things as they are, but bumping into what your own unconscious challenges are, whatever they are at the personal level. Certainly, I would say this, that for anyone who's got some active dream life, anytime any planet's in the sign of Pisces, it's in our dream world that we receive some of the most direct consciousness of what that planet has to offer. So even that should give you a clue to what the change is. Saturn says we're working with things we've got to learn. Saturn in Aquarius says where it is, it's about serving others, gathering in community, doing your best to sort of bring us to peace. And then I think we are in territory where we're going back into the personal, more so, because Pisces is the archetype of the unconscious. And then we're not in what are we doing together? We're doing what is my unconscious tripping me up through and as. Also, for those of your listeners who know their natal charts, what's most important about Saturn changing signs is where's that hitting your chart?
It's a little early for us to take a look at our charts, but it might segue. Do you know where it's hitting our charts?
Your North Node of Dharma is in Pisces, which means that as the year sort of gets into mid to late spring, you're actually being moved forward powerfully, because the North Node is your future and your Dharma, based on the good karmic lessons you've been working on in the past 2.5 years. Interestingly, you'll get this immediately. Saturn's been in your 4th house for the last couple of years, and the 4th house is about things that happen in the home, behind the scenes, that has to do with privacy and hearth. And the last 2.5 years between the way you've related to home and the way you've related to family has been very Saturnian. Now, when Saturn moves into Pisces, Saturn is in your 5th house. The 5th house is the house of joy, children, starting a family, trying to find a place to settle, might be part of your experience of Saturn in the house of joy and family and expression of that kind. Jessica has the first bit of Pisces in her fifth house. It's already happening in there. In other words, Aquarius, where Saturn has been, was half the time in her fourth house of home and half the time in her fifth house of children and family and joy and movement. And so Pisces begins in her fifth house, same house as you. So both of you, in fact, have an interesting focus on that fifth house of freedom, movement, joy, self-expression, children. That's where your sort of most dominant places of where constriction is going to happen. And does that not make sense?
It does. So let's go from there. We'll double back to our chart a little bit later for people. So we've got Saturn into Pisces. So all these interesting ingresses going on. And you can maybe share what in the world is an ingress. And then let's get into the next one, Jupiter into Taurus, and when that is, and if we need to duck and cover.
Ingress just means enter. Egress means exit.
Yeah.
So ingress is just astrology speak for enters. So Saturn enters Pisces in March. Jupiter enters Taurus in May. Jupiter is the planet of manifestation, bounty, good fortune. Where Jupiter goes, all yummy things follow. One of the things that's been beautiful about this year into 2023 is that Jupiter's been in Pisces quite a bit this year. Pisces is, remember, the unconscious. Pisces is the energy through which we manifest before form. Nothing can occur in the world of form unless it is created and generated first as an idea, followed by feelings. That leads to form. And Pisces is where we do that internal mental and emotional equivalent of what we desire. That Jupiter moved into Aries earlier this year. We might have felt like, whoa, now we're going. I'm ready to expand and do my plans and have my projects take off. But he only got about 8 degrees in and retrograded back in the spring to Pisces. He just moved out of Pisces about a week or so ago from the solstice and the new moon, right? So we now have this thrust of movement between January and May of 2023, where plans that we've been working on for a while, things that we marinated in last year that maybe took off but then didn't, can have legs now. And that zipping through of Aries by Jupiter, from like, he's not going to retrograde in this sign. He's just going to zip on by. That's actually disappointing in some ways, because if you have any Aries points or Jupiter's making lovely transits to your chart during the first 5 months of the year, it's not going to repeat by retrograde. But it does tell us that the months of movement and powerful new stuff is January through May. What happens mid-May, right there in the middle of the month, is Jupiter will move into Taurus. This is actually gorgeous for manifestation into form, because Taurus is literally the world of form, right? Pisces is where we create. Aries is where we start. But it's not until we get to Taurus that ideas that we create inside, that we start up by Aries energy, become really grounded in form. So from May through the rest of the year, the planet of manifestation is in a sign ruled by Venus, which is marvelous. It means that, first of all, it means that money is good energetically in the second half of the year. Of course, based on where Taurus is in your chart and how Jupiter is going to hit your chart on an individual level. But it does tell a story that the year has available to it something that last year did not have, which is the planet of manifestation, fully engaged in the first half of the year in a sign that says we're out there starting in significant, definitive movement of startup energy. And then in the second half of the year, we're in sort of grounded, form-based Taurus, so that we can take the things that we sort of shoot out into the world and deepen and make significant during the second half of the year. It's the nicest planetary story of next year would be Taurus's. Jupiter's.
I get
Jupiter.
it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take the positives where I can, Michael. So
Yes, sir.
And then last but not least for next year, and then we're going to go big picture, and everybody fasten your seatbelt because here it comes. But the nodes into Aries and Libra.
The nodes changing signs are very significant in astrology, because where the nodes are, the eclipses occur. And eclipses are wildly transformative. And so the sign that the nodes move into are the sign that the eclipses take place in. Quick technical lesson on what the nodes of the moon are. You've got the orbit of the Earth around the sun as this very large sort of circle of energy. Then you have the similar circle of energy around the Earth, the moon's orbit. You've got this big orbit and a little orbit that are connected. Like the little orbit sits on top of the big orbit. There's a vector of energy that shoots out from where those orbits connect. So that if I were sitting on Earth and I were looking up at the mathematical description of where those orbits cross from our perspective, that's the nodes of the moon. There's one in front of the Earth, if you will. That's not really accurate, but it's good enough for our description. The front one is the north node. The back one is the south one, the south node. These points are so important both in cosmic astrology and the movement of planets because they generate eclipses. When the Earth and the sun and the nodes are lined up every 6 months, we have a moment where the beam of light is broken. And we have no way of knowing this, Michael, but I have a suspicion that we have eclipses is also part of why we have life in biological form on the planet.
Not to interrupt, but a lot of the downloads I've been getting lately are about electron pulses, about everything flipping positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. And where you have an eclipse, what you have is a pause where we're flipping to the other direction for just a brief moment.
I'm going to just add something right there. The nodes of the moon wobble from our perspective.
Ooh,
a
good.
day or two looking like they're direct, a day or two retrograde, direct, retrograde, direct, retrograde, wobble, 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 wobble. And it's consistent and it's fast in the relativity of it. It's 2 or 3 days in one direction, 2 or 3 days in another. But if we were like watching the hummingbirdness of it, that wobble in the nodes also reflects the pulse that you're talking about, that's subatomic. Woo! I got excited about that. I don't know if other people did. So where eclipses are, because, listen, every new moon and full moon is a thing we all move through. We set intentions at the new moon, we culminate at the full, and then we do it again the following month. But eclipse moments are transformative.
Yeah.
And so the signs that they are in are impactful at the collective level. Right? If I were sitting with somebody and we were talking about their lunations and how a new moon or full moon was going to impact them during the year, it'd be very sort of personal. But once we get into the eclipse energies, they're transpersonal. Everyone experiences them at the same time and in the same way. So a year and a half-ish ago, it was right at the top of the year. It takes a year and a half for them to move. But at the top of 2022, the nodes changed signs where the north node was moving into Taurus and the south node was moving into Scorpio. The nodes appear to move backwards, right? So they're not moving in the same forward direction. They move backwards. So the north node moved backwards into the 30th degree of Taurus. The south node backwards into the 30th degree of Scorpio. Taurus is about love. Scorpio is about death. So this was another thing I think that made 22 more powerfully transformative at the personal level than I might have conveyed last year. I would have said it. The language I was using was move towards love or get caught in death. How much more dramatic can you get? But so what this means is the eclipse season both of them in 2022 were absolutely designed to have us become better at being loving in seemingly unloving circumstances. Taurus. And to do that, we have to let go of the things that trouble and challenge us that we want to stay attached to. But if we stay attached, Scorpio is great for attachment. There's nothing like a Scorpio energy to be like, oh, I'm going to keep this grudge forever. Well, if you stay attached while the South Node is in Scorpio, you can't move towards love. So the eclipse season in 22, both of them were about setting new intentions and dropping the past in such a way that would help us facilitate more love in terms of where we're going and moving away from the things that we're attached to. What happens in 2023 is another ingress. The nodes are going to change signs, but not till July. That means that the first eclipse season is also in Taurus Scorpio energy. So it's about deep losses and changes at a kind of death level so that we can have more love in our hearts. When we move into the nodal change that happens in July, now the north node of the moon is moving out of Taurus and into Aries. Remember, they move backwards. So the south node is moving backwards into Libra. One thing we could say about the sort of Libra Aries trajectory is that if Aries, North Node, is about movement, feeling on fire, ready to say, I got this, I'm ready, I'm moving, then Libra as the opposite sign would be, I want to keep the peace above my own power. I accommodate so much that I can't have my own strength. I'm passive about how I receive life's possibilities, and therefore nothing occurs. Where we want to let go of those limits, the limits that come from accommodation, peacekeeping at all costs, keeping the balance because I'm afraid to sort of fire myself up for what other people might think, feel, or respond. So the eclipses at the end of the year and in 2024 are all about knowing who you are and moving powerfully in that direction and letting go of assessing your identity through the opinions of other people.
Which is huge right now.
So back to what we're talking about, like peace for humanity and creating, a world through the things that, either introvate or activate. This is part of that. If you aren't standing in what you contribute and bring, you're not doing your part. And in the second half of next year, that's going to be part of the eclipse consciousness is let go of that which keeps you sort of immobile. Yeah, you got it.
So then do we go to next year and 2025 first? Because I know you're hopping up and down about 2025. Or do we go to Venus? What do you think?
Let's go to Venus. Let's
all right.
Venus. So
take me to Venus, Mike.
There was no way for me to know this in advance because, well, first of all, when you're looking at like a year's worth of astrology in a December before the year ahead, it would just be impossible unless that's all I was doing to look at the broad strokes and the medium strokes and the tiny strokes. I can't do that in a forecast. But what was very powerful about Venus's movements last year was that in December, she was in her retrograde process. And as we were turning the year into the beginning of 2022, Venus spent 2 weeks with Pluto when she typically would spend about a day and a half, right? If she's just zipping around, she connects with it. Now, Pluto and Venus have a very special relationship. It's love and the underworld. And it's like, seemingly, do they go together? It's like, well, yes, they do. Just ask Persephone. Persephone, who was stolen by Hades and brought to the underworld. She's having a blast down there. Because there's just a natural way that love and the power of destruction are related, but we're afraid of that. We shrink back from some of that depth and intensity. So Venus spending 2 weeks with Pluto as we started this year imbued Venus with 2 weeks worth of the Lord of the Underworld's downloads. So she was just flattened out while Pluto was like, here, take this, Venus, because you got work to do. And I'm going to take you to the depth of the underworld to show you what is possible when you open your heart at that deep a level. Yes, it's vulnerable. Yes, it's terrifying. But as you do, you will experience more of what you have to offer than you can possibly imagine. That was going on in our psyche in December and January, December 21, January 22. So then, because of how Venus moved throughout the rest of the year, the language in astrology would be Venus transits during the whole year have that power built into them because of the earlier transit and the prolonged nature of it because of retrograde motion. She happened to also participate directly in almost all of the lunations of the year. So when the moon was new, Venus was doing something interesting. When the moon was full, Venus was doing something interesting. In the first half of the year, she was exactly conjunct many of the lunations. And so every new moon and full moon, not every, but almost every, involved aspects of the heart shift. This is back to the personal experience of the year, that everyone's heart was being reworked in 2022. And here's where I did fall short, which was, how would I know this? At a level that I could not possibly have imagined. I only learned it because I experienced it myself. So why this is interesting to me to be talking about at the very end of the year, when this is something that happened 12 and 13 months ago, is that at the very last day of the year, Venus and Pluto are coming together again at the exact degree point they spent 2 weeks at last December. The exact degree, Michael. You can't make that up. So there's something gorgeous about the calendar year devoted to heartfelt changes and the ability to really have individuals die and be reborn with regard to how they give and receive love. Did you and Jessica not have an experience this past year where your capacity to love died and got reborn?
December 22nd of 2021, we 12221. We had to choose to let go of baby Miraku to have baby Hana, and then May 6th of 2022, baby Hana was born.
There you have it. And we finished the year off coming full circle. So saying, see? Venus comes back and says, thanks, Pluto. We did good work. Mwah. Catch you next time. So there's more. Venus's retrogrades are anywhere between 2 and 3 years apart. They don't happen with any kind of great regularity, but they're never shorter than 2 and never longer than 3 years apart. And at the end of the year, actually it's summertime, she's going retrograde again. And though that may bring challenges to relationship, changes in direction with relationships that rise up during a Venus retrograde often don't pan out well. Relationships that are going a certain way will shift and change. Sometimes there's lots to say about a Venus retrograde that might be bumpy, challenging, disappointing, or other challenging, because love is, what we all want and look for and crave and think we don't have, when in fact it's all there is. The fact that Venus is going retrograde again, I welcome, because who doesn't want to be a better giver and receiver of love?
Woohoo!
And she's doing it in Leo. She retrograded in Leo in the summer of 2015. So there's connections back to that period of time. If you remember anything that happened in your love life in the summer of 15, there might be some replication of that during the summer months, July and August, when she does this again. But really even back to the questions you asked earlier, we talked about like, what do we do in this world? It's like, even further iterating that I don't know, but one thing I do know is that the more we allow love, the better everything is.
That was my, I have a Daily Woohoo newsletter, dailywoohoo.com. And that was what came out in my automatic writing today is beautiful. Just like you're saying, it is all love. And we get to be the bringers of love to an extreme with the energies that are coming about right now.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Let's go to 2024. And, I want to bring something up that goes to 2025, but it's just popping into consciousness when you're talking about all these things that have happened in the past that are rolling forward. And I'm really not a politics guy. I love everybody, period, done deal, end of story. But January 6, 2021 keeps on coming into my consciousness as we're talking about all of this.
Well, this is, all right. I'm about to start. Listen, when we were in 2020 and the Pluto return for the United States chart was coming up.
And you were telling me all about it.
Well, I got to tell you, before I was telling you all about it, I was like, oh my God, am I going to go out there talking about this? I'm the hopeful guy. I'm the positive spinner. I'm the sunny one who's saying, we got this. And I have similar feelings now because I have a commitment to being a voice of hope. Even when at times my own sense of despair shows up because I am a human being. I'm just another bozo on the bus. I still am committed to this idea that I am a voice of hope amidst the chaos. Partly because that's how I live. For the most part, I have to work at this now more than I did, say, 5 years ago and earlier.
The energy is weird and stronger now.
It was easier. I was just in the world, but not of it. And I could always, when I was a little boy, I was in the world and not of it. And then 5 to 10 years ago, it was like, oh, jeepers. Now I have to effort. Thank God I have, a toolbox, filled with tools. It's, I have tons of spiritual tools to be able to do that. So what alarms me about 2025 is the planet Neptune and what Neptune is doing. So Neptune is in Pisces and will move into Aries in the middle of 2025, which I might add is the first year of whatever next president the United States elects. So I call Neptune the Great Spirit, because I'm a spiritual guy. I'm not a religious guy. When I say God, I'm really talking more about quantum physics. I relate more to atheists than religiosity. I have no connection to the God of religion. That's a projection as far as I'm concerned. In my world, Neptune's movement is about your spiritual practice. Are you meditating? Did you learn how to do things that will keep you aligned? Are you living in flow? You've got this planet of, for the sake of this topic, I'll say we've got the planet of religious ferocity in the sign of the unconscious and the land where there is no form yet, but ideas are marinating that will become form. Aries is the energy of the first iteration of form. Aries is the energy in the Pisces void that says, well, no one's going, I'll go. And he dives in and says, I am. Well, Aries is also the sign ruled by Mars. It's the sign of war. That makes me very nervous about Americans who are ready to go to war at a local level. Between a country where violence is already problematic, I can't see anything else but it expanding exponentially when Neptune moves into the sign of war. You've got people who are staying, I think, quiet, but on the ready, who are prepared to explode into action after an election that may not go the way they desire it. So you've got this year where the United States is in a new presidency, whomever wins, whoever runs, and a landscape that one doesn't have to look at the news for more than 5 or 10 minutes and be like, oh, wow, I don't know what's happening next, but it's probably going to be fill in the blank, dicey.
What can we do given the energies? And I've had the mute button here, and I'm not sure if people will be able to hear or not. Somebody dropped off a package at the same time you were speaking, which set Rue off, but there was a perfect timing to you talking about the possibility of some really heavy stuff and Rue sounding the alarm at the same time. I am always looking at the positive, and it's not that I'm a Pollyannish positivity kind of guy. I think that kind of positivity is dangerous. I always say everything exists on the same coin. Where there is darkness, there is light.
It's light, yeah. Well, I mean, in some ways, my answer is in that, what you just said, that on the coin there, where there's darkness, there is light. So let me start with this.
Yeah.
I know who I am, and I know what I'm here to do. And part of what I'm here to do is to be a voice for using astrology primarily as a context, but also other things. You know, I have classes where I teach actual, self-discovery and, but I've committed to this idea that I'll be the voice, and I'll even be the voice of hope when it looks unhopeful. So if I sit in my body, in my small self, and I think about that, it's scary. But if I sit in the big voice chair, I get to say, but Michael, this is who you are. You're prepared for that. And you will be the voice of hope when the chaos gets greater, because that's who you are. So that's my personal sort of that's how I'm going to get through it. But I also have to believe that what I just described is a template of all of us. The more you are someone who knows who they are, what they contribute, and how that's valuable, and have the courage to push past your limitations to do that. And I'm not talking about everybody has to become a spiritual teacher. Maybe it's just how you bring kindness to the star, the line in Starbucks. That as all of us know who we are and know what we bring, and then bring it into all arenas where we dwell, the better we will serve what is needed at that time. If I sit in my body today, what might be needed at that time is scary because we're not there yet. But we'll be carried there, and I trust that I will know, you all will know what to do and what to contribute when we get there, if we're staying in the flow as we get there.
Thank you. I've had 2 near-death experiences and then 1/3 substantial boo-boo afterwards. I guess a 4th 10 years later, but who's counting? With that said, my titanium parts were great. With the lesson that I got out of these things, other than it was really a heart crack opening for me, was a mantra of kind, gentle, easy, good. Kind, gentle, easy, good. Universe will give me the lessons with a 2x4 happily if I don't listen.
That's right.
But if I listen, if I pay particular attention and I do the inner work, the lessons tend to, more often than not, come to me in a kinder, gentler, easier fashion. And I'm wondering if we can take the message from today, because I don't want people leaving today with that REM song that was stuck in my head as we started this. It's the end of the world as we know it. I don't want them taking...
No, neither do I. But I also don't want anybody with their head under the sand.
No,
either.
I'm saying use this energy.
Yeah.
Use this energy to do the work.
That's right. I think you and I said exactly the same thing, that it's about meeting. If that's happening on a Thursday, that Thursday will go better if on Sunday I did my work, on Monday I did my work, on Tuesday we will be carried there together. And this is another thing too, is that this is why we do this consciousness work, the meditating, the healing of wounds, the practice is designed so that we can really understand that the world isn't happening to us. It's not even happening for us. One could say it's happening through us, but I would say the highest way to describe it is happening as us. And I think that when people do their practice and heal their wounds and touch the connection that's available when you do that work, we get to feel that sensation in our bodies and say, oh, wow, this is happening through me. And therefore, I don't have to fear it as much as my little mind will tell me I do. This is just simply the moment unfolding.
Thank you. I want to see if there's anything else 2023 retrogrades or into 2024, because we skipped ahead to 2025. But before we do that, you had mentioned before the show, if we pull up my chart, Jessica's chart, Hannah's chart for just 1 minute, you had mentioned there was going to be more instability in my life to come, of which we are all experiencing. There is nobody at the end of 2022 going into 2023 that's going, this has been my most stable year ever.
Right.
Nobody can say that. And so the question becomes, what do you see there in our charts? And both individually and as a collective, leading the witness here, but is our instability here to serve us?
Well, I can answer that question. You don't even need me to answer that question, Michael. You know the answer to that. Of course it serves you. Hana is a direct result of that.
Yes.
Right? This beautiful being who lives is a result of you and Jessica doing that surrender beautifully. And it was freaking painful. In terms of, if I glance at Jessica's chart, where I see the instability is right in the middle of the year. The planet Uranus is going to hit her Mars in the Great Eliminator angle. Mars is about the body and action and choices and decisions and behaviors. Uranus changed things very suddenly. If you guys are looking to kind of settle in some ways, this transit on Jessica's chart does say that she, at any rate, is moving away from projects and goals that have required her energy over the last whatever to change tracks. Now, this is not a stable transit, but it does say that there's a dramatic change away from the way things used to go into some new direction. I'll throw this in there. She has a rough January, which is right around the corner. Any big shifts or changes over the next month or two that are planned?
We have our boat, our new RV by the name of Burp, parked right outside, named Burp by baby Hannah. And at the end of January, we are supposed to transit or take an ingress to Florida, assuming that a place.
So the month of January is, in fact, like a gear shift for you guys.
In a huge way.
Okay, that's good. I like the word huge for that. Now, interestingly, Jessica has a slightly destabilizing shift in direction energy that comes in July.
Yeah.
In the same month, you have one.
Oh, goody.
Yours is harder, actually, than hers. The planet Uranus is going to cross your Saturn starting in July. For Jessica, it was Uranus saying old life going away, new life being moved towards. With you, now, I want to say this even before I finish. Just because this is a wildly destabilizing transit, it has to fit into the narrative, like we talked about earlier in the podcast, right? So like you're good with change. You don't have trouble when Uranus comes along and says, whoops here, whoops there. You know how to do that. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So
I don't necessarily like it or invite it, but I'm good at it.
You're good at it. So Saturn is not just the taskmaster teacher, especially how we read Saturn in a chart. a person's Saturn placement in a chart also represents their life structure, the stability, the foundations on which you do your life, the structures, where you live, how you function, where you vote. Your case right now, those structures are fluid and mobile, and Uranus crossing someone's Saturn takes the anything can happen and probably will energy, focusing it on the, this can't change. Nothing can change this solid foundation. So if I didn't know a person, I'd be like, your job might change, your home might change, your family might change, relationships can change, your finances can change, like anything can change. So we got to, again, contextualize your ability to pivot with change will make this much less intense than if it happened to her or him or that person. Another thing is that there's a couple of transits that suggest that your spiritual center is powerful, more so than even typical, because Pluto is sextiling your Neptune. Neptune, the planet of spiritual connection. Pluto, the center of our power and gravitas. You also got a little fated thing happening. Pluto trining your fated point. So you're going to be guided well next year. But I promise you, I think Jessica takes on the instability of the current moment of getting the family ready to get into that RV and back on the road. And I promise you, July, summer, is kind of the moment where the window opens up for change that is ultimately destabilizing, but that might be what is leading you guys to the next chapter.
I'll take it.
You'll take it.
Is that, in a sense, the longer term, not age of Aquarius longer term, not like next 20 years longer term, but do you see that? I'm not asking you to go beyond 2025 here.
Well, here's where I would say I think not.
Yeah.
Your north node of the moon next year has Saturn crossing it. Mm-hmm. The north node is your destiny. Saturn crossing the north node is one of the most powerful transits that says I'm assimilating the knowledge gained from all of my experiences, and I'm able to take that wisdom and funnel it into a period, which is the whole year, of reaping. You are reaping next year. So even though there's this destabilizing energy of change, Saturn tells us between the spring of 23 and the very end of the year, December of 23, you are, and therefore Jessica too, because she's part of the family unit, are being driven forward in a powerful way of, this is the life purpose. So there's something not final about that, Michael, but definitive. So it would be hard for me as an astrologer to say, yeah, your year is going to leave you floundering and not sure of where you're going, because fact, Saturn is saying, this is where we're going. You've been working on this forever. And here we are. Now, the destabilizing energy starts in the spring and is a little bit longer than this, so I can't promise that it plays out easily. But archetypally, I would describe next year as significantly powerful with regard to this is why I came.
For anyone who has a family, you have a son or a daughter who has their own natal chart, who has their own path, their own energies, their own everything. Does their chart directly affect yours? And if we looked at baby Hannah's, for instance, how does that affect both of us?
I thought about this a bit over the last day or so because, not to break the fourth wall, but Michael and I talked before we did this.
Perfect.
Right? That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. One of the things about a sentient being who has no agency yet is I'm not and this is just me being like, how? I don't know, Michael, because it's like my clientele is not filled with 1 and 2 year olds. So I have no experience with that. And from a perspective of just, well, what do I know about astrology? It's like, well, I'm a transit astrologer. I describe the waves of energy that people are building their lives with. But your child right now is at a point where you would be able to see how her chart is being impacted just by watching her. And on a day where she's like, that's a good astrology day. And on the day she's colicky and that's a difficult day. But that's as far as behaviors working with energy to create a life that she's engaged in. Whereas if she were 20 years older, I'd be like, well, honey, what are you doing with this wave of energy? Well, I'm going to school. I'm doing it. So from a certain perspective, you even asking me that question is such a stretch, because my first sort of line of response would be like, yeah, but like what's happening to her chart is something that's going to reflect her bowel movements and her,
Which I've got to be honest. All of that stuff, whether she sleeps, whether she wakes, whether she regurges, whether she keeps it down, all of that stuff has a radical effect.
Now, listen, I'm right. I certainly know that, but I don't know that like looking at her chart.
No, I get it.
However, I want to say something that is really, really interesting to me. Hannah has her North Node in Taurus, because remember, the nodes moved into Taurus last year. We talked about that. She was born last year. So her North Node, which means her Dharma and her destiny, her movement and life purpose, has Uranus, the planet of awakening, hitting her North Node in July. So there's just something about the summer months that is impacting Jessica's chart, Michael's chart, and lo and behold, also Hannah's.
All I hear from that, and then I want to go into the last things here. We'll wrap it up for everybody. Is get thyself to the water this summer as a cooling element.
Oh, I love that thought. What a beautiful way of receiving that information.
So we've got some other things coming up this year. Any worth discussing? We've got a black moon Lilith. We got a entering of Leo, an entering of Virgo. What are the last things that we haven't even gone into Mercury retrogrades? Where do we go with this?
Mercury retrograde real quick, without getting into the deep like dives of them. There's something to be said for a year where all of the Mercury retrogrades are in Earth signs, and they're not crossing over between sign borders. So what's nice about that for us is that a Mercury retrograde in an Earth sign is less destabilizing than especially air signs, right? Air is intellect. Mercury is intellect. Mercury retrogrades in air signs is very difficult. We bump into things a lot. And Mercury in Gemini, Mercury in Aquarius is terrible for communication and electronics. So air signs, yuck. Water signs are more emotional. And earth signs are about groundedness, stability. And so I like that as something to say about Mercury retrogrades. And then in terms of like a forecast, it's like, honey, Mercury retrogrades 3 times a year, 4 times a year, standard. We're going to have them. We're about to go in one right now. Mercury's going to turn around and start in an earth sign, Capricorn, right before the year starts. So we enter the year in a Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, and then we're going to get 3 more in earth signs as the year progresses. Best Mercury retrograde news in a year or two to have them all in earth signs.
Thank you. Black Moon Lilith, Leo, Virgo, anything?
Well, like Black Moon Lilith and her movements is marvelous for, certainly in my world, because I'm teaching shadow work. I'm inviting people to come to my classes. do triggering homework that allows them to get below the surface of things that are unconscious, but sort of rising up that we typically repress. Mm-hmm. That's a Black Moon Lilith consciousness. Things that want to come out of the unconscious that we're afraid of and that we shove down. So Black Moon Lilith's placement helps us go into those places to do some of that work. And Black Moon Lilith has been in Cancer most of this year. I think it's interesting that Black Moon spends 9 months in a sign, and it's the energy of powerful, creative, and destructive feminine principle. And so, what is the most creative and destructive feminine principle thing would be birth, giving birth. It is simultaneously creative and destructive. It's a powerful feminine principle. I love working with Black Moon Lilith because we're trying to dismantle a patriarchy, kids. And in order to do that, we have to have a rising up of the powerful divine feminine. So with Black Moon Lilith in Cancer, most of this year and into the beginning of the year, early in January, we've been focused on family dynamics, the past, obsessive memories, things that we are really struggling with emotionally that we wish we weren't, that we pretend that we're not. Black Moon Lilith moving into Leo then says that our focus on doing that deep unconscious work is about unleashing our creative potential. Cancer, very introverted, very inner for that kind of shadow work. But Leo is a very extroverted sign and the sign that invented personal creative self-expression. So a lot of the work that we're going to be doing in those unconscious places from January through early October is going to be in the domain of Leo's consciousness for creative expression, leadership. Right. So if Leo is the inner leader, and what you're shoving into your unconscious in a repressed kind of way is, I'm too small to lead. The shadow work will be well supported to go into unconscious spaces, figure out where your inner leader is, and then let that rise up. That's my best language for how I work with Black Moon Lilith in Leo. And then she enters Virgo for the last 3-4 months of the year and into next year, where it's really about deep healing. That's a very positive and powerful placement for Black Moon Lilith because Virgo is the sign ruled by Chiron, the great healer. And it's where it's the Humpty Dumpty puts, has all the king's horses and the men put Humpty Dumpty back together again. That's Virgo. And so from October 23 into 24, the shadow work focus is on healing the body, putting things together and processing and integrating stuff.
Thank you. On that note, you have an extended upcoming forecast. You have a first class, Finding Your Voice coming up as well. What can you tell us about all of your goodness, Michael?
Yes, I've got 2 things coming up in the immediate. One is my astrological forecast for 2023, which is very comprehensive. It's going to be 2.5 hours long. I'm going to cover all of these ingresses, all of the new moons and full moons, the eclipses, the retrograde cycles, and all of these ingresses in depth. That's going to be held live on January 1st at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So for those of you who want to spend a few hours with me on New Year's Day, that's when I'm doing it live. The recording is just as effective as showing up live, and that will be available forever. So michaellennox.com for that. There is an exchange. It's $24.99. Then you get to keep the recording. The first class of the year actually launches the second Saturday of the year. Is that right? Have I got that right? It's January 7th, I believe. At any rate, anybody interested in the class is going to be going to michaellennox.com, checking out classes, and finding your voice. This is one of those classes that it sort of rose up in this funny kind of way where I suddenly realized that I was empowered to teach people about how to use their voice, how to find their voice, and have a more powerful experience of it. So in the first class, we talk about the voice from a resonance and a physical perspective. I even teach the vocal training technique that actors receive at conservatory. So that for people who want to like literally work on their resonance, I'm offering that information in the first class. And then the rest of the class is all about triggering the shadow. Lots of deep homework writing about how your voice got limited in your family environment, in your sibling unit, out on the playground, etc., to help people investigate psychically why there's a limit on their voice, and using it more powerfully to set boundaries and just be more powerful. So that class starts on January 7th.
Very, very cool. And the URL one more time, Michael.
michaellennox.com.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I was going to ask you any words of wisdom coming up, but I'm going to leave it this way, because you and I are both about coming forward into the light. Yeah. Despite some challenges, shall we say, ahead. Are you hopeful, Michael?
You know, I am always hopeful. I sometimes feel badly that at how easy it is for me to find hope, because I know that it's very difficult for many people to find hope. So am I hopeful? Yes. Partly because I think I faced my own sort of Herculean task of healing my own traumas, having been born into violence and chaos and sort of, a squeezing off of myself. And I said, I got to grab myself back. And I made that commitment as a young adult, and I faced the demons. I think that we are better suited to meet this world and its current demands than we know, because we're fed fear on a daily basis. And if we weren't watching the news, I don't think we'd be as terrified. And I think that what that tells me is that the fear that is ubiquitous has been generated on top of what is the potential for true organic sense of hope that exists at the level of your body on a Tuesday in your home, when you're touching your heart and your belly, taking a breath and saying, I got this. Extend that out into the world and know that we got this.
Woo-hoo. And we do got this. We do.
We do.
I cannot thank you enough. This has been phenomenal, Michael. I do hope that you're a little wrong, but not the hope part. But it is all here.
We'll continue to talk about it.
It is all here to serve us, each and every one of us. And this is, to me, it ain't easy, but it's a beautiful ride. We signed up for it, and something great is coming out of it. And on that note, for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun. Check out Dr. Michael Lennox's Daily Astro Alert, his upcoming forecast, his first class, and everything else that he has to offer at michaellennox.com. And above and beyond all else, shine bright. Woohoo! What a beautiful, powerful, important interview we just had with Dr. Michael Lennox, leaving me really inspired for the future. Because I know, and I know for you as well, we're going to do the work which is going to make you and I exceptionally prepared for anything that comes our way. On that note, I've got a new tool to help bring your vibration up, 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 and way up, and it is free to you. It is our Daily Woohoo newsletter. How does it get any better than this? Simply visit Daily Woohoo, spelled WOOHOO.com, dailywoohoo.com, to get a daily boost of high vibrational goodness. Forget about the espresso. This brings you way, way up without bringing you back down on the tail side as well. No sugar involved. Just high vibrational goodness. That's dailywoohoo.com. Of course, I know that you're a mystic, meant to be a mystic, and are always meant to be a mystic. You are a mystic, we're a mystic, always were meant to be a mystic. You can come to inspirenationuniversity.com, join our School of Mystics with so many other beautiful souls who will get you and will understand you, and that you will get as well. It's inspirenationuniversity.com. And last but not least, if you want to get the automatic writing experiences, plus lots of bonuses, or attend our live classes where you learn how to channel, become a medium just about overnight, simply visit automaticwriting.com. Love you guys so much. Here's a link to the next amazing video. Keep on shining bright. How does it get any better than this? Woohoo! Love you guys.